The year is 1944, and it's World War II. Two planes crash into an island somewhere in the South Pacific, followed by their parachuting pilots. American soldier Hank Marlowe and Japanese soldier Gunpei Ikari. They start shooting and running as soon as they see each other, and the chase leads them from the shore to the jungle. When Hank comes to a halt near the edge of a precipice, Gunpei takes advantage of the opportunity to strike him with his sword. Hank disarms Gunpei by blocking the sword with his bare hands and pushing him away. Gunpei, on the other hand, grabs a knife and lunges toward Hank with his blade inches from his throat. When a large, hairy hand comes over the side of the cliff, followed by a massive gorilla head that roars at the troops. The scene then shifts to Washington, where a taxi is parked in front of the White House. Bill Randa, the chief of the U.S. government organization Monarch, and Dr. Houston Brooks, a geologist, emerge from it. Brooks is unsure if going to meet Senator Willis is a smart idea, given the time, but Randa reminds him that they're broke and this is their only opportunity. The senator welcomes them into his office, despite his reservations, and the men quickly explain. They've discovered an uncharted island in the South Pacific that legends claim is Skull Island, the place where God did not complete creation and is notorious for all the ships and planes that have gone missing there. Randa believes that the 1954 nuclear tests were not tests, but rather an attempt to destroy something, and that there's an unimaginable biosphere to be discovered. The senator still thinks it's a fairy tale, so he leaves his office. But Randa and Brooks don't give up, and they follow him with more reasons to do it. There's a mission coming up nearby soon, so they could join it, and there are many things they could find on the island. Brooks isn't sure what it is, but whatever it is, they can't let the Russians find it first. This persuades the senator, who informs them that this is the final favor he will perform for them. Randa says that a military escort will be required. Following that, we see an American air base in Vietnam where all soldiers are preparing to return home now that the war is done. Officers Glenn Mills, Earl Cole, Reg Slivko, Reels, and Preston Packard, their lieutenant colonel, are all present. Packard returns to his office after a night of drinking where he's checked on by Major Jack Chapman. Chapman appears to have a position lined up for him, but Packard believes his achievements have been useless. Packard receives a call later in the evening asking him to join Randa's expedition, which he gladly agrees. Brooks and Randa, meantime, are going to a pub in Saigon to enlist a former Special Air Service captain as their tracker. They locate this man, James Conrad, playing pool and winning money inside the bar. After losing, his opponents become enraged and attempt to harm him, but he quickly knocks them out with a cue stick. A few minutes later, the three of them are sitting at a table attempting to strike an agreement. Conrad considers this mission to be exceedingly dangerous, so he demands 5 times the money they're paying, plus a bonus if they return safely. So they agree. Conrad also wants to know what they're looking for, but Brooks and Randa just say they want his help exploring difficult terrain. We next cut to a photojournalist, Mason Weaver, working in her darkroom. She gets a call alerting her that she's been accepted into Randa's expedition, which fills her with joy. When questioned why she's so interested in this, she explains that she's heard the same thing from multiple sources, which suggests they're all lying. There's got to be something going on. All the characters meet up in Bangkok a few days later to board the boat. The soldiers are dissatisfied with their new mission as they had hoped to return home after the battle was won. Weaver introduces herself to NASA staffer Steve Woodward, then to Packard, who isn't a fan of her anti-war reporting. When everyone's on board, the ship sets sail, and all the explorers gather to hear another NASA official, Victor Nieves, speak. He says that the island is encircled by a regular storm system, which keeps it hidden from the rest of the globe. With Packard's military helicopters, they should be able to get through, though. He also introduces Brooks and Randa, as well as San Lin, a third scientist on their team. The explanation is then taken over by Brooks, who says they'll use explosives to induce vibrations that will help them map the island. Then it's Chapman's turn. He explains that the storm's interference will cut off all radio contact, leaving them alone and that he'll meet them there 3 days later at the island's north end. It's the last safe departure window for an unknown period of time, and no one should miss it. Conrad and Weaver scout the boat after everyone's been dismissed and stumble across each other. They're both skeptical of the motivations for the mission, and they make fun at each other's justifications for being there. Doesn't take long for them to reach the island, and the storm looks even worse in person. Nieves doesn't want to cross it, where Randa does. They leave it up to Packard to determine whether or not to go in. All the soldiers, as well as the civilian personnel, board a fleet of helicopters which take off successfully at first. Things grow complicated as soon as they enter the storm. Continual lightning must be avoided, and the helicopters are constantly rattled. Packard, on the other hand, is trained and maintains his control, directing his fleet with a speech about Icarus until they successfully make it through. The island's beautiful, but there isn't much time to appreciate it because the plan's about to begin. After leaving all civilians on land, except Weaver, Randa, and Conrad, the helicopters spread out to find the designated bombing site. As the vibrations from the explosions are picked up by the radars, Brooks' theory's confirmed. The bedrock is nearly hollow. Everything's fine until one of the helicopters gets hit by a flying tree and knocked down, while another is smacked and captured by a huge hand. The soldier sees the enormous face of an ape before being devoured by it when the helicopter's wheeled around. After everyone raises their eyes to see the gigantic figure standing against the horizon, Kong, the giant ape, all sirens go off. He just sits there roaring at them at first, but when the troops start shooting at him, he doesn't hesitate to protect himself. Because the bullets don't really affect him, Kong can easily navigate among the helicopters and bring them down, and he even crushes several troops who reach it to the ground safely. Kong takes out each chopper one by one, and he doesn't leave there until there are none left in the sky. As a result of the attack, the expedition's members were dispersed. Weaver, Nieves, Slivko, Brooks, Sandlin, and Conrad are gathered in one location where they'll be guided up north as close as possible to the rendezvous site. Chapman is alone in another location, but he manages to send Packard his location before communications break out. Packard and Reels are on another location, and when they start advancing, they shortly come across Cole, Mills, Woodward, and a few more soldiers. Packard discovers Randa is also nearby, so he goes to chat with him privately. He points his revolver at him and demands to know why this expedition's taking place, so Randa explains that monsters exist, and that no one believes him. The bombs weren't thrown to study geology, but to shake something loose. Randa was on a ship that was attacked by a monster many years ago, and although he survived, the authorities informed his family that his ship had sunk in battle, and the public was never informed. Randa had never given up hope, and now he wants to exterminate these monsters before they exterminate humanity. He requests that Packard accompany them home with proof so the cavalry may be dispatched. Packard responds that he is the cavalry. Slivko returns to Conrad's group and tries unsuccessfully to contact the others. They come across a gigantic bison-like beast while walking by a lake, which Slivko points his rifle at, but Conrad orders him to put it down because the Skur buffalo isn't threatening them. The thing turns around and walks away after staring at them for a few moments. Packard and his soldiers are looking for Chapman and the special weaponry in the meantime. One of their troops is killed by a large stick in the throat as they travel through the bush. When they glance up, they see the stick is the leg of a giant spider-like thing called Mother Longlegs. The squad instantly begins firing at it, but the Mother Longlegs still manages to capture Mills. They can't shoot at a friend in the way, so they start cutting the legs while Mills takes out a knife and starts cutting the limbs that are grasping him. It takes him some effort, but he succeeds, and the team opens fire again as soon as he's dropped to the ground, slaying Mother Longlegs. Meanwhile, Conrad's team discovers some abandoned ruins. They're encircled by natives, aiming weapons at them as soon as they take a few feet inside. They draw their weapons, but any possible fight is averted just in time by the appearance of a man among the natives. It's Hank, the World War II pilot who landed there. The natives back off when he assures them that everything's okay, and Hank leads the squad into the ruins. Turning to Chapman, he's refilling his canteen when Kong appears. Chapman hides behind a rock, watching the giant ape drink water before reaching into the river and grabbing the massive Meyer squid. Kong tears off its limbs and eats them while the creature tries to squeeze him with its tentacles. He drags the rest of the Meyer squid after him as he flees. Hank explains to the crew in the village that as long as they stay with the natives, they'll be safe. They're surrounded by a massive wall, but it's not for Kong, it's for the other monsters. Hank leads them to a sunken ship where he shows them some antique drawings on the rocks. They illustrate the indigenous beliefs. They lived in terror of monsters for thousands of years, until one day some of those monsters began to defend them instead. Kong is revered as the king and god by the locals, and he will not attack unless provoked. It wasn't Kong who killed Gunpei. Instead, it was the skull crawlers, large underground lizards that have been awoken by the explosions. Kong normally has no trouble dealing with them, but the biggest one is very dangerous. It's the one who murdered Kong's family. Conrad shifts the conversation to Hank, telling him about the rescue squad that will arrive in 3 days. But Hank believes it's impossible to get to the north end of the island in that time. At least, not on foot. Packard's team is going through a marsh when they come upon a flock of weird, large birds called psychovultures. Even though they don't assault them, Packard shoots one of them, scaring the others away. The men are becoming anxious, worried if they'll make it in time. But Cole encourages them to put their faith in Packard. Returning to Conrad and Company, Hank informs them that he and Gunpei had been building a boat before Gunpei died. Now the squad will assist him in completing it so they can reach the rescue team in a timely manner. While the rest of the crew works on the repairs, Weaver mingles with the locals and takes photographs of them. He suddenly hears a commotion coming from the other side of the wall and investigates. It's a scur buffalo caught under a plane. She attempts to help, but she doesn't have the strength to carry a whole plane by herself. Thankfully, Kong arrives and picks it up. He looks at her for a brief period before walking away as though he approves of her conduct. Packard's team discovers a blood stain Kong left on the mountain during their search for Chapman. They now know the beast can be harmed, if not killed. While Conrad's team continues to work on the boat, Chapman continues to try to contact through radio, but it's ineffective. He settles down to rest on a large trunk, but the trunk moves, revealing that it's not a fallen tree, but the spore mantis that looks like one. Chapman fires at it, scaring it away, but also attracting the notice of another monster. He barely has time to turn around before being devoured by a skullcrawler. The sun sets, night begins. While others in the town converse, Conrad and Weaver gaze at the northern lights. She's trying to take a picture, but her flashlight's broken, so Conrad hands her his lighter, which was a present from his father, World War II veteran. He was a hero to him. Packard's squad is building up camp in the bush, and Randa advises him that this is a bad idea. Packard responds that he can go if he doesn't like how he conducts things. The boat's ready to go the next morning. Since Gunpei had been his brother throughout their time together, Hank removes the sword from Gunpei's grave to take it with him. Everyone boards the boat and they finally set sail after some extra work to get it started. They received a call from Packard's team as Hank was telling them about his family. They're instructed to send off a signal so they can locate themselves, which Packard does. They're close enough to pick them up, but the joy is short-lived when one of the strange birds flies by and eats Nieves with its flock. They don't have much choice but to keep pushing. They dock the boat and disembark to rejoin Packard and his colleague a few hours later. Conrad wants them to get back on the ship and depart right away, now that everyone's back together. But Packard resists because he still wants to find Chapman. Hank objects to the proposal because heading west implies going to the land of the skullcrawlers, but because Conrad's job is to track, he eventually gives in on the condition that they return before dark. The group sets out in a quest of Chapman, and along the road they come across Kong's parents' skeletons. Despite Hank's protests, Packard forces them to cross the mass grave, which is shrouded in a strange mist, which they realize is flammable when Cole accidentally drops a cigarette, causing an explosion. They don't make it very far, though, before the terror reaches them. Then they sneak in behind the giant bones. The Skullcrawler then disgustingly pukes out a skull that lands near Conrad. Conrad immediately notices it as Chapman's name tag. The terror then turns around and leaves, as the team comes out thinking it's safe. But when Randa's flash goes off, the Skullcrawler jumps on him and eats him. They open fire at the crawler, but the mist made it hard for them. Suddenly it appears out of nowhere, but Hank manages to cut him with a sword before it pushes him out of the way and eats one of the soldiers. It goes after Weaver next, and that's when a soldier sets fire with his flamethrower. The Skullcrawler slams its tail into the soldier, sending him flying and generating another explosion where he lands. Slivko's hit by the explosion and knocked out, landing near gas cans. Well, the soldiers shoot the Psycho Vultures from before. Conrad gets Hank's sword and a gas mask that was on the floor and puts it on to enter the leaking gas area. He kills every Psycho Vulture along the way till he reaches Slivko, but the Skullcrawler has also arrived, and Weaver arrives just in time to toss Conrad's lighter at the creature, causing it to explode. Hank reminds Packard what a terrible idea this is, and Conrad informs everyone that Chapman's dead, which he proves by showing the name tag the creature had puked out. Packard, on the other hand, is unconcerned. He only wants to get to the accident scene and grab the explosives in order to murder Kong. Despite the efforts of Hank, Conrad, the scientists, and Weaver to persuade Packard that Kong is nice and he was simply defending himself, Packard refuses to listen. Everyone draws their weapons, and it appears that a fight's going to break out. But Conrad intervenes. He informs Packard where he and his soldier need to go, and he'll return the people to the boat, with the exception of Woodward, who stays with the military. They come across Chapman's belongings along the road and retrieve them in order to return them to his family. Meanwhile, Conrad instructs his troops to wait a bit while he seeks high ground. Weaver joins him. Packard's party discovers the weaponry late at night and begins planning a trap for Kong that includes flames. Conrad and Weaver then return, having made it to the edge of a cliff and managed to get a decent view at the river and where the boat might be. Kong pays them a visit at that point, but he doesn't attack since he recognizes Weaver, who's now gained the courage to touch his nose. Kong doesn't seem to mind when he hears the soldiers' blasts. He roars and flees. Conrad and Weaver rejoin their team and order them back to the boat. The scientists comply, but Hank joins them when he discovers that they intend to save Kong. Kong, on the other hand, has arrived at the soldiers and is ready to battle. Packard puts a torch around the ape and sets a ring of fire around him as he runs to them on the water. Kong appears to be unable to move at first, but he eventually makes it through the flames and smashes Woodward with his palm before collapsing to the ground. Packard orders his soldiers to lay their charges, but we can sense their hesitation in their eyes after witnessing Kong's suffering. Conrad, Weaver, and Hank come to stop them as they all grab the detonators. Soldiers and civilians point their firearms at each other. As Packard shouts about a soldier's dirty deeds, the group appears to be at a standstill, at least until Slivko arrives and points his rifle at Packard instead. Conrad declares victory, but a disturbance in the water interrupts him. It's the giant Skullcrawler. Everyone flees, save Packard, who stays behind to detonate the detonator in the hopes of murdering Kong, but is crushed by him when he awakens. Kong battles the giant Skullcrawler, but he's quickly defeated. As the gang approaches the island's edge, the sun rises. Weaver shoots a flare so Brooks can see it while they work on a distraction to buy them time. As the Skullcrawler pursues Conrad and the soldiers, Cole resolves to stay behind and sacrifice himself, intending to blow up his explosives when the lizard gets close enough, but he's forced away by its tail. When Kong reappears, he punches and smashes the Skullcrawlers as many times as he can, while Weaver finds a high vantage point and launches that flare. Kong's driven back by the Skullcrawler after a few more hits, including one with a tree, and falls on some chains that bind him. When the scientists arrive with the boat and fire their weapons at the Skullcrawler, while the troops climb aboard, they manage to distract the monster long enough for Kong to release himself from the chains and use one to assault his opponent. smashing the Skullcrawler with it before catching it and slamming it against the mountain, which causes Weaver to fall into the water. When Kong notices her, he rushes to knock the Skullcrawler out with a few punches before diving his hands to save Weaver. He dispatches her just as the Skullcrawler resurfaces, leaping upon Kong and seizing his wrist with his mouth. Kong seizes the opportunity to grab its tongue and pull the Skullcrawler's guts out. Ew. Weaver seems fine when he opens his hand, so he gently places her on the ground where Conrad comes to check on her. They watch as Kong gives them one final look before departing. Everyone's aboard the boat and sailing to the rendezvous place in a matter of minutes. They're scared that if news gets out, the place will alter, but they pledge not to tell anyone. We see Kong, one final time, roaring at the camera as a fleet of helicopters arrives to rescue them. After that, there are 2 more extra sequences, one of which features Hank reconnecting with his wife and son. The other's Conrad and Weaver, who believe they've been apprehended by the military. But it's simply Brooks and San Lin who reveal they've discovered film of other monster kings, like Kong, in a cave. The drawings represent Godzilla, Mothra, Rodan, and King Ghidorah. Final graphic depicts Godzilla and Ghidorah engaged in combat. There you go, our recap of Kong Skull Island. We hope you enjoyed it. If you want to show your appreciation, leave us a comment letting us know your favorite part of the movie. Also, click that like button while you're down there. And if you want us to do more recaps like these, let us know of what. We'll do our best. Thanks for tuning in.